How did it happen? Can we explain it through normal meteorological means, or through a belief in catastrophism where disaster came all of a sudden? How did this flood take place? We would say that the flood took place due to the sins of the people, as mentioned in the last ayah quoted before now, where it said that they, because of their sins, they were drowned and they were entered in the fire, and they didn't find any help besides Allah. That particular passage is showing that it was because of their sins. What was the sin? That sin was idolatry, worship of others besides Allah. Please listen to this verse that states the actual condition of the people in the time of the Messenger Nuh alayhi salam, who was preaching to them. Listen to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us. He says, وَقَالُوا لَا تَذَرُنَّ أَلِهَاتَكُمْ وَلَا تَذَرُنَّ وَدًّا وَلَا سُوَاعًا وَلَا يَغُوثَ وَيَعُوقَ وَنَصَرَ. They said, do not forsake your gods, do not abandon Wad, Suwa', Yaghuth, Ya'uq, and Nasr. Surah Nuh, the 71st Surah, Ayah 23. Now, how did the people get to the state of doing this idolatry? What caused this terrible situation? Well, we have the answer coming from Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, the first cousin of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who asked these same questions and received concrete answers. That answer, when commenting on this passage, Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu gives us incredible insight. He says, quote, with regard to Wad, Suwa', Yaghuth, Ya'uq, and Nasr, these were the names of pious men from the people of Nuh. When these pious people died, Shaitan came and inspired the people to build altars where they were interred, so the people could sit there in gatherings. They then made altars with the names of the pious men. But when they did that, no one worshipped them until the people of that generation died, and knowledge of why they were built was forgotten. Then they were worshipped. Closed quote. Now this is taken from Sahih al-Bukhari, the Arabic edition, volume 8, page 667, under Kitab al-Tafsir for Surah Nuh, under the chapter on Wad and Suwa'. The English Sahih al-Bukhari is volume 6, pages 413 to 414. What this is telling us is that the idols that they later came to worship were originally pious men. These pious men, when they died, the people went astray in building altars for them, as Shaitan came and inspired them, and then eventually, after all those who remembered what the altars were for had died, they were worshipped by the people that had no knowledge of the situation. This is why the flood took place. Now the next thing we want to ask is, when did the flood take place? When? We should answer the skeptic by saying, we do not have any chronological dating for the time of the flood. But what we can say is that it took place more than 1,000 years after the time of Adam, according to Sayyiduna Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu. Now, consider carefully what he says about this issue. Quote, between Adam and Nuh there were 10 centuries, where everyone was clearly upon the Sharia and the truth. But then they differed, so Allah sent prophets as bearers of glad tidings and warners. Closed quote. This is taken from Jami' al-Bayan, volume 12, page 334, and the chain of transmission was approved by Imams al-Tabari, al-Hakim, Muslim, and al-Bukhari, but not included in their collections. But however, it was approved and agreed upon by al-Dhahabi. So, what basically Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu is saying is that between Adam and Nuh alayhi salam, there were 1,000 years where everyone was upon the Sharia and the truth. Then came the evils. Then came the falsehood. Then came the awful doctrines. Now, who exactly was involved in the flood? Who was involved in this event? Well, those involved in the event were Nuh alayhi salam and his people. What evidence do we have of this? Well, we have two evidences. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا نُوحًا إِلَىٰ قَوْمِهِ, and we sent Nuh to his people. Surah Al-A'raf, the 7th surah, ayah 59, and Surah Al-Ankabut, the 29th surah, ayah 14. So it has been clearly stated, without any doubt about it, that the Prophet Nuh alayhi salam was sent to his people. And so they were both taking part in this dialogue, either belief or disbelief. They were the actual, if you may say, actors in this divine play. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had set up this plan, and they were sent to them. He was sent to them with a message to give them, the Prophet Nuh alayhi salam, either to accept or reject. Then comes our next question. Our next question is, where did the flood take place? Where did it take place? The flood took place in the country known today as Iraq. This is where it began to take place. The exact location of where it began, we have no clearly defined revelation or archaeological evidence. Therefore, we are fit in our statement just to put forward Iraq. Now someone could say, but why Iraq? How would you know? From where did you get this understanding? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَاسْتَوَتْ عَلَى الْجُودِ, then it came, the ark, to rest on Al-Judi. Surah Hud, the 11th surah, ayah 44. Now Ibn Atiyah, who was a great scholar, in addition to being a historian, has mentioned that the ark was boarded near the Syria-Iraq border, and that the ark floated around the vicinity past the Kaaba, which was still visible even in the flood, and settled in Al-Mosul, just outside of the peninsula in modern-day Iraq. This statement of his is taken from Al-Muharrar al-Wajiz, pages 948 to 949. So what we've tried to do is first show that the ark, or actually the flood in which the ark was involved in, where it was floating up on top of those flood waters, we attempted to show that the actual flood was a historical event. That was the first thing. The second thing that we wanted to show is that the Prophet Nuh alayhi salam and his people were the actual participants in the events that took place. We also attempted to show and give a reason of why did the flood take place, and when did the flood take place. We attempted to answer those questions as best we could, but again, information is scant on some of these things, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has kept the wisdom of the exact timing and dates of those events with himself. But one of the nagging questions that sometimes comes from those who are seeking knowledge, who may have a bit of skepticism in their heart, is, where did all of the water for the flood come from? Where did it all come from? There were actually many sources where the water for the flood emanated from in the beginning. Please consider these passages. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, حَتَّى جَاءَ أَمْرُنَا وَفَارَتْ التَّنُّورِ, and when our command came, and the fountains of the earth burst forth. Surah Hud, the 11th surah, ayah 40. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has also mentioned, وَقِيلَ يَا أَرْضُ بْلَعِي مَاءَكِ وَيَا سَمَاءُ اقْلُعِي وَغِيدَ الْمَاءِ وَقُضِيَ الْأَمْرِ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and then it was said, O earth, swallow up your water, and O sky, withhold your rain. So the water ceased, and the matter was finished.